Well, hello, my name is Troy Roach. I'm a citizen scientist studying low-dose nicotine patches for long COVID, ME/CFS, fibromyalgia, and other similar diseases. So today I'm here to interview Yannic. He is from Germany. He actually has a job working as an advisor for the government in Iraq, in Baghdad, which is pretty exciting. Since I'm also an expat, an American living in Spain, it's interesting to meet people who are also expats and going through these trials and tribulations of long COVID and ME/CFS and these types of diseases. So, Yannick, of course, you work for the government, but of course, what you're saying has nothing to do with the government. This is just your personal experience. But
Yes,
so first, can you introduce yourself a little bit and maybe talk about like what your health history was like?
sure. I'm Yannic, 36 years old. I've been always quite fit, actually, not overweight. I used to skateboard in my youth and without any issues. I did notice though that I had these Epstein-Barr reactivations every once in a while. Sometimes when it was cold, I would get it, and then after 2 or 3 weeks, they would always go away. And then in December last year, I got the flu, didn't even test positive for COVID. The flu was over after 6 days, and that was beginning of January. And then I noticed these red dots on my arm that would usually come up whenever I had a Epstein-Barr reactivation. And I thought, oh no, here we go again. So it will be another 2 or 3 weeks of extended bed time. Yeah, little did I know that I would not come back from that easily. And I became really sick, basically bedridden. I was not working. I was on sick leave, and my parents took care of me, and without them, I couldn't have done it. So I'm very thankful for them. And I remember being so sick without any kind of movement, not movement, but how can I say, any kind of evolvement. And so I would ask my parents, like, will I ever become well again? And they said, yeah, yeah, of course, of course. But then later, just recently, they told me, well, Yannick, actually, we just said it. We didn't really know. And so January went by, February went by, March went by, and I was basically bell 10. I felt as if I was turning, or as if I had become something like a vegetable, like still alive somehow, but I really, it's as if I lost my identity. Friends called me. I was too sick to answer the call. Actually, a friend of mine is here right now who just nodded because he's been checking up on me, and sometimes I would just ignore him. Yeah. And then Troy, and then something interesting happened. So I learned that in anything health related, no one can advocate for yourself as much as yourself. So no doctor or no one will ever do that. And so the little energy I had, I just looked left and right of potential remedies, any kind of supplements, perhaps that would get me going, and nothing had worked until then. I spent um, low four figures on supplements. Nothing made the difference until I stumbled over a post on a Reddit in a Reddit forum. It was in a Epstein-Barr group, and someone recommended nicotine patches and claimed that that person got well after only 10 days. And I thought, oh, nicotine, no, I can't put another poison on my system. It will be detrimental. Until a few weeks later, my mom and we were thinking, okay, what else could we do? And I was hesitant to tell her because I thought, like, nicotine, you're crazy. You want me to slap you in the face? But to my surprise, she said, well, I also heard of it. There was some report on TV. So she was informed. And the very next day, I ordered them from my local pharmacy, and I started the nicotine patches.
Mhm.
Luckily, I knew about the dose. I knew about what to expect, because I also became a member of the fantastic nicotine test patch group that you supervise. Yeah, the result is remarkable. Only 24 hours after patching, or 24 hours into patching, I was able to think again. I had coherent thoughts. I was able to write an email in less than 3 hours. It was it it I was shedding a tear because I was really so content that I finally found something that started working.
Well, this is like they would call this a remission event, because if somebody starts feeling a lot better very quickly, then it's called a remission event. It's kind of like the sickness disappears for a few hours or for a day or so. So how long did that first remission event last for you? Was it like always good, or most people kind of have a very good beginning, but then they kind of go through a Herx phase or a Verx phase? So
Yeah,
where do you follow?
the Herx phase started after 2 or 3 days, but I knew about it and I appreciated it actually because I knew this is healing right now. And I went through the Herxing. Parents were like, "Are you sure this is helping? You got all these symptoms now that are getting stronger." Yeah. I'm hanging in there. And yeah, just after another 2 or 3 days, I was out of that. Already feeling quite a bit better. And I overdid it. Me overdoing it, what did that entail? That entailed 2 phone calls and like 2 emails. That was it. That sent me into a crash. And the crash lasted 4 or 5 days. But I continued patching and I got out of it, as I just told you, rather quickly. And after the first Herxing, I felt significantly better, although I was still very sick. So maybe I improved from a Bell 10, because January, February, and March, I was definitely Bell 10. I couldn't do anything except barely going to the loo, and that's it. And then maybe I would go on I would reach Bell 20 or Bell 30. I increased the dose. I went from 3.5, that was my initial dose, to 5 point, what is it, to 5.75. And then I experienced the Herxing again, and the whole thing started again. But I was just holding on because I knew I finally found something. 1 month after I started the patching, I left the house for the first time. I went to a restaurant with my parents. We sat outside. It was quite loud there, and that did send me into a PEM crash again, but that only lasted for 2 or 3 days. I continued being on the patch, and 2 months in, I started working remotely. I was able to do that from home, so definitely not in Iraq. But 3 months later, I was able to fly out again and continue my mission.
Wow.
Troy, I really want to tell you, it's I'm not exaggerating when I say nicotine patches have saved my life. They have given me a second life, for sure. For sure.
Oh,
I will
that's
be forever
fantastic.
grateful to all the smokers that ever wanted to stop smoking, because this is why we have this precious product readily available and very cheaply available in
Mhm.
every pharmacy. And I will be forever grateful to your tremendous work. Really, you are a vanguard to me. I have nothing but respect for you and your work, and also the other people that are working on that are engaged in the group, because 90% of the information that I got and that I felt that I needed, I received through the nicotine patch test group on Facebook. Nicotine test patch group.
Yeah. Oh, that's great that patients that can help each other go through these complex diseases. And there's also lots of great volunteers who, are just as group experts, just there to kind of basically repeat the same information over and over again to people, because when you're sick, you don't have time and energy to look through all the information.
Exactly.
So I'm definitely not alone, and of course I'm following in the footsteps of Dr. Leitzke from Germany, who I'm sure you know pretty well since you're from
Of
Germany.
course. Of course.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask something. So first, how long were you sick before you started using the patches?
I was sick for 3 months.
3 months. And you think it was from a flu or from COVID or?
So I assume it was from the Epstein-Barr reactivation, because I did have that in the past, so I knew the symptoms. And this particular reactivation was triggered by a mild flu. And so, and I'm not too concerned about this because like long COVID, long Epstein-Barr, long flu, long dengue fever, the symptoms are all the same. And it seems like there's not a big difference.
Yeah. I mean,
Big
there's
difference
a
there.
lot of overlap definitely between the groups, and it's interesting to see that nicotine seems to help so many different groups. It's not
It's
just
incredible. It's
it's not
really,
just like
it's
not just for a
incredible.
long COVID or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
I want to urge anyone who's thinking of trying it to do it. If there are any, maybe the patch makes you itch or whatever, just take it off, but try it. Try it, see for yourself. It's nothing but a miracle. It has been an amazing gift.
so some of the other questions that people would ask is like, for example, what brand of patch were you using in Germany? You say you bought it from a pharmacy. Because people always say,
Yes.
okay, what brand did you use? Because I want to use the same brand.
Yes. So I learned through your group that there are some knockoffs on Amazon. So I thought the product really is not that ridiculously expensive to begin with. So I'm not concerned with saving $10. Let me get the real deal. And I've bought, and I'm still buying Nicofrenon or Nicofrenon. That's maybe how you would pronounce it. It's a German supplier and us or provider. And I've been very content with their product. No itching, easy to use. I cut them up, no problem, and I will continue to use them.
And how did your dosing change? You said you went from 3.5 to about 5 milligrams. So
Oh
did you
yeah,
change for that?
I went significantly higher. So 3.5 maybe for 10 days or a week, and 5.25, and then up to 7. That was each maybe like 2 or 3 weeks on these doses. And once at 7, I was like, all right, maybe we get going again. And each time I had a herxing reaction. Small one, it got lower, but still, and I encouraged it. I wanted it. I think the longest time I've been on 14 milligrams, at times up to 21. Recently, whenever I have to fly or do anything that might be a challenge to my fragile system, because I'm still fragile. Let's talk about this later. I take 21 prophylactically because I want to avoid a PEM crash. And also one day after not exercise, but like any kind of like a lot of walking or any kind of things that would stress my system, I would continue to patch on 21 milligrams later. I did decide just 1 or 2 weeks ago to go back down to 14 milligrams as my baseline, just so that whenever there's an event coming up that will impose stress, that I have this tool to go up and make sure that I won't crash. But I did reach a tolerance for 21 milligrams. For a short period, I even went up to 28, and I was able to handle it. Of course, in the beginning, 3.5 already made me tuned in. Not too jittery, but I definitely noticed like, all right, it gives me a little buzz. So if you had given me 21 or not to mention 28, I would not have lasted long. Definitely not.
Yeah. So now your base dose is 14 milligrams.
Correct.
And so on the Bell score now, where would you say you're at?
I would say perhaps 70. So I don't have the scale in front of me, but I think 70 was something like you can work, you have symptoms, but they are mild and they are easy to deal with, but you still need to take breaks here and there. And that's how I
Yeah.
feel. Like I do take breaks here and there, but it's not affecting my overall ability to perform. Again, I'm not doing anything in regards to physical exercise because I am definitely not healed yet, but my mental capacity is fully there. Although my girlfriend sometimes like, I know you're just silly. So maybe she would object sometimes. I feel mentally really good and sharp. Yeah. My body, however, is still affected by the illness. For instance, whenever I try to engage in physical exercise, I crashed the next day. And this has not changed for the past few weeks and months. 4 weeks ago, no, I tried exercising for just 15 minutes and I refrained cardio. I just lifted some weights, and not even very heavy weights, just some weights, like 10 kg dumbbells and stuff like that, or 12. And yeah, I crashed. The next 2 days I felt horrible, and I just crawled into a dark room and kept the noise low. So this is also a question that I have. Maybe we can talk about this later.
Mhm.
Just let me know when it's fitting. But what can I expect in regards to the healing trajectory? When should I try physical exercise again? And if I should try, in what capacity? Like maybe just a minute or two, just to see how my body reacts the next day. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I used kind of what they call gradual exposure therapy,
Okay.
but just starting with like 1 minute, just
Okay.
like 1 minute of like, okay, I'll do 1 rep of 5 kilos
Hmm.
of like each exercise or something, and spread out throughout the day, so it's not constant. Or if somebody has postural POTS type of symptoms, like right after they do any type of effort, it usually helps to like lay down right after. Like they'll do like some exercise, it just seems like nothing. And then they'll lay down for a minute to make sure that blood's getting everywhere. And then if there's no problem in the next day or two, then I'll try 2 minutes. And then eventually you build up over time. It's a lot easier to see like where the limits are. And also because there is probably some neurological damage, in my opinion, then the brain needs just like little steps of saying, oh, I can do this. Okay, that's fine. I can do a little bit more. Okay, that's fine. Whereas if it's like 15 minutes all of a sudden, and before it was zero, then that's like a big shift for the system. So it's just
I
like
see.
really tiny shifts like that. I started off just with like 1 rep of various body weight exercises, and then I started using 2 kilos, and eventually built up to being able to do kettlebell with 16 kilos, and then doing other exercise. For me, it was easier to start with weightlifting because it's not. If you're going out walking or running or something, then that's, for me, I think running is the final frontier.
I 100% agree.
And I started last year doing sprints, like high intensity interval training, the HIIT training, where I'm like running for 30 seconds and then take a short break and then run again for 30 seconds.
Mhm.
So in the end, it's really intense exercise, but the total amount of time doing the exercise was low. But I think if I had to go out and run 10 kilometers, then it would just be like dead.
Mm.
So I mean, there's different modalities. So for me, it's weights, and then after that, maybe some zone 2 effort, but keeping it very, very low intensity. In theory, zone 2, I use something called a lactate monitor in order to measure my lactate, in order to have an objective measure. So I found my zone 2 limit was like 120 or maybe 123 beats per minute. And then after that, I did a VO2 max test this summer in July, I think, June or July. And they said that my zone 2 started at 135 and went to 150 or something like that. So over a year, I was able to shift my zone 2 from maxing at 123 to maxing at 50, which is
Amazing.
good without
Impressive.
doing too much exercise per se,
Impressive.
quality over quantity.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
everybody's different, and I think having the lactate monitor is a good tool, because if you do something for 10 minutes and then you see your lactate is going over 2 millimoles, it's gone too far. Yeah. But I mean, there are different companies that will do VO2 max testing and lactate testing.
Cool.
So a
I'll
VO2
check it out.
A VO2 max test would be too difficult for most people, but those same groups, if you tell them that you want to do a lactate zone 2 test to know where your zone 2 is, then you could probably just pay them for a zone 2 test when you would just do like some light exercise on a treadmill, and that would be constantly checking your lactate levels. And then when you got to, above 2 millimoles or whatever, then they would say, okay, this is your threshold, and that would give you kind of like at least a safe threshold. But then that threshold will keep changing over time. So if you have actually access to lactate monitors, then you could constantly be checking that and adjusting it, etc.
Got it.
I ran out of lactate strips, so I didn't test again for another year, and I was constantly training with this zone 2 at a very, very low level. So that's probably safer as well.
Yeah. Then something that I wanted to ask you, what is your opinion on breaks as well as switching the schedule? I'm asking, let's say from 24 hours, 42 hours off. I'm asking because I feel like I reached a plateau. I know that I have not reached a plateau because I'm still making progress. Just last weekend, I was in London with my girlfriend, and I walked around. I think it was 14,000 steps, which is the highest by far that I've done in the past months. So I'm still progressing. However, it doesn't feel as exciting as it felt in the beginning. And I want to know your opinion on that.
Breaks, I don't know. I think people just have to go with what they feel and then to experiment and just see what happens. In general, I would take breaks when I just forgot to put on the patch. And then for a long time, I was just using 5 milligrams, but not necessarily noticing any major differences. After a while, the recovery it just seems very slow as time goes on. But I don't have a magical system of, okay, well, you have to do this break or not do a break, or, you just have to experiment and see what happens. And I think some people are afraid to take breaks because they're like, okay, well, the nicotine patches help me. So if I stop and take a break, then I'm going to be worse. So I think maybe you have to be in a good mental space to be like, okay, yeah, well, I'll take a break for a day and I'll be fine.
For now, I'm scared of taking breaks because I've read about people where the patch stopped working for them after the break. Yeah, I don't want to fall into this if this happens often, just because it's my lifeline.
Yeah, I don't know. For now, if you consider it your lifeline, then I just wouldn't worry about breaks. And maybe just someday when you don't, like on a weekend or something, you could try to like just have one day off or patch later. Try a lower dose one day and see if you notice any difference or not. So you could try, you can just experiment with it. It doesn't have to be a complete break. It can just be a lower dose. Or I think that the necessity for breaks is not so important for the doses that most of us are using because it's such a small amount continuously going into the body. And we have nicotinic receptors throughout all of our body. So it's not the same thing as a smoker, whereas they're getting a very large dose in a short amount of time, always like in their mouth and their lungs, wherever, and then straight into their brain.
And there triggers the dopamine rush also.
Yeah, it triggers the dopamine rush and all that. So there's all these cascading effects that we don't have. So the break is not as important, I think. The break, one reason for the break was because, one, in the first study from Dr. Leitzka, they just did 7 days and then they stopped and then they didn't need any more because they hadn't been sick for very long. Who knows? And then there are also some people who said, well, I was on the patch, not doing anything. And then they stopped using the patch. And then on the break, they felt cured. And they're like, what? I'm cured now.
Amazing.
Because there's also there's like a rebound effects that affects how glutamate is absorbed in the brain and other things like that. So
how long after taking a break would that come up that people felt cured?
I've seen anything from 3 days to 3 weeks.
Okay.
But that's the problem is that a 3-week break is because it takes that long for the cholinergic system to completely reset in some people. Most people within 2 weeks, their cholinergic system should be completely reset and not be used to nicotine at all. But we say 3 weeks just to be like on the safe side to make sure that
Okay.
it's kind of starting off fresh again and to really know what your true baseline is without the nicotine per se. But I just tell people that don't stress about taking a break. Just do it when they feel like, oh, I feel like I need to take a break, or I want to take a break, or I feel like I don't need it anymore. Or maybe you forget to put on the patch for a day and then you feel better the day that you didn't have on the patch or something. And then you're like, okay,
Yeah.
well, I'll try a break for a few days. And then after a few days, you'll be like, oh, I feel horrible. And then you're like, okay, well, I'll put a patch back on. So it's all experimentation until we have some type of test we could do to say, okay, you don't really need it anymore. We don't have any objective markers.
What's your thought in regards to choline as a supplement? Because I know from the group, from the FAQs, you're supposed to take it when you decrease the dose or even when you're stopping completely. But I also read that in some cases the choline might be beneficial while being on the
The choline is because some people probably already have too low levels of choline in their body. So if you're at a deficit in choline, even if you're using the nicotine patch, then it might not be helping because there's just not enough choline in the body to make the acetylcholine to support the system. And then for the breaks, it's just kind of like to replace this extra, the nicotine going into the system and say, okay, well, instead of nicotine, we'll give you choline to kind of compensate for this, external input as well. For me, I never noticed any difference with the choline at any time when I took it. And also probably because my diet was already fairly well fixed and I have eggs for breakfast every day. So I have
got
plenty
it.
of choline in my diet, and that's not an issue for me. I think it's once the choline deficiency is fixed, then it's probably not such an issue. But for breaks, choline and vitamin B12 supposedly can help reduce the withdrawal effects of not having the nicotine in the system. But we don't have any scientific proof of that. I mean, it's based on scientific research, but we don't really necessarily have proof that that's the way it works with people with long COVID or MECFS or whatever. So you can experiment and see if using the choline helps reduce
I will.
any on it, or if you think that your diet might be deficient in choline.
Mhm.
But choline can be the reason in general we don't suggest to have choline while you're on the patch is because if you have too much cholinergic stimulation, that can cause depression, or it can
Yes.
cause a cholinergic crisis, which actually could be fairly serious in some people. But I think with people like in long COVID per se or MECFS, that's probably less likely to happen because there's a good chance that they're already deficient in choline. I saw a study this week that said people with MECFS weren't deficient in choline, but people with long COVID were. That was one difference. But maybe it has to do with how long they've been sick as well, or
Yeah.
what they're
I
doing.
will try it for just a few days and see what happens. I mean, all of this really feels like the Wild West,
Yeah.
like going west and just finding out. Also, in regards to the symptoms, we share so many of the symptoms, but then in regards to what actually helps, it's so different from one person to another.
Yeah.
One finding is that nicotine probably is the number one thing that, like, if anything helps these groups of patients, then it's nicotine is covering most of them. But then in regards to supplements, I've been taking so many supplements, and yeah, I don't know if they help, but I take them in a moderate dose. So I'm just like zinc, selenium, magnesium, all of this. This is my base, my go-to. These are my go-to supplements, and then of course all kinds of vitamins and other things. It's a long list. I will not bore you with that. But also I take low dose naltrexone, and I am on a 1 milligram dose per day. I cannot really tell you if it's helping me, but it's not hurting me, so I'm sticking to it.
Well, you haven't tried going up in dose?
I started one. And every time I increased, I felt very like as if there was strong fatigue. I was difficult to concentrate. I was really tired. Now when I take it, it's like I feel fine, but I don't know how I would feel if I hadn't started it. I'll continue on it. If I had to guess, it's probably helping me. Maybe I want to believe it's helping me just because some people say it has been a game changer, just as nicotine has been a game changer. So yeah, my verdict, I will let you know maybe in half a year.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll tell you. What's your thought? What's your thought on ivermectin? I know many people they say it has helped them, but it's also somewhat controversial. Is it messing with the gut microbiome? Is that perhaps an issue?
I don't know. I've taken some, but not very much because it's very difficult to get hold of where I am. I saw one study, it wasn't published, it was just a doctor that did it in Australia, and he was using a medium-sized dose for like 40 days straight, and then people felt a lot better. And then but then they had to keep a maintenance dose, like they had to take it twice a week or something to
Mhm.
not lose the benefits. My guess is that it has some type of effect on the neuroinflammation in the gut in a similar way that nicotine does. Um, affecting the brain through the gut.
Mhm.
And then maybe some people have different fungal infections or some type of other things that are just kind of lingering in their bodies that it's helping with, whereas they're not the type of thing that normally is stopping them from getting by in Western society. But then when they're very sick, any benefit they could have to their health is helpful.
Exactly. You're desperate for
Elite
anything.
ath- elite athletes looking for that extra 1% here and
Mhm.
an extra 1% there, and then
Mm.
all adds up in the end. So I think in general, for the most part, at reasonable doses, that it's fairly safe to try. But I don't hear too much about it now. It kind of seems to have dissipated the interest in it.
Mm.
But I'm sure that it probably does help some people, but because the science is so biased against it,
Mhm.
it's difficult to get good good data.
Okay. Yeah.
Which I understand with nicotine. There's so much bias against nicotine that is so
It's
difficult.
wild.
It's uphill. It's an uphill battle.
Yeah, I was very biased. It's nicotine is being synonymously used for tobacco. So this is where the confusion comes from, right? But in my humble experience, nicotine is a nutrient and it's really supporting my nervous system to just be normal and heal. Neurosim didn't work. I tried that, but it might help others. People can try that out. They have a return policy that was they were really kind to me, that all worked out with returning. Then I tried the red light therapy. I bought a quite large panel and I did that diligently. It did not seem to help me. Also here I was fortunately able to just return it, and I'm really thankful for the companies that offer these generous return policies. But I hope that people just go out and find what helps them. Oh, yeah, one thing that probably was very beneficial to my very quick recovery is my mom cooks amazing food. I know it's a huge privilege, so I'm pointing that out. All like 100% organic, lots of vegetables, no dairy, or I was on a diet, no alcohol, of course. I mean, that was unthinkable when I was sick, when I was that sick. No alcohol, no dairy, no sugar, and my gut microbiome was great. I had it tested as well, lots of diversity and just healthy bacteria. And so maybe that's something that people want to look into. If the nicotine doesn't work, maybe they have to go one step back and support their gut. Yeah, just a thought I wanted to share with
Yeah,
whoever is watching this.
yeah, I agree. I agree with that. With the next study that I'm setting up, one of the criteria is that people have to be on a fairly clean diet, at least avoiding added sugars and processed foods. It doesn't have to be like a perfect organic diet per se, but at least avoiding the worst types of foods in
Yeah.
order to do the study, because I think it's pretty clear that people are trying nicotine at the wrong time when there's so many other things going on, and it's causing this unbalance, and it's just not
Mm,
the right thing at the right time.
yeah. What has Troy? What has been your most surprising finding ever since you engaged in nicotine? Like, is there some kind of fact that stuck with you that you can think of,
I don't know.
or
I
some
think
strange correlation between patient groups or anything in that regard?
I don't know. There's so many different things. Not specifically one thing that stands out. But I think in general, at low doses, it just seems to be a good thing. So I'll probably just use a low dose patch long term forever, just in the hopes that it will be helpful in reducing the chances of Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease, etc. From the data, it probably will help, especially with something like Alzheimer's disease, because with COVID and everything, all of the people are getting Alzheimer's disease more often and
Mm,
younger. And I think that if we're already sick with long COVID or ME/CFS, then it probably in some ways makes us more vulnerable to types of things. So I kind of see it as like a long-term prophylactic, and yeah. But also, I think one of the biggest shocking things was that when I learned about HSPs, highly sensitive people, that shocked me because I'm not a sensitive person. But then when I did the highly sensitive person test, and I came out as a highly sensitive person based on that. So it's kind of like in the same family as ADHD or autism as being neurodiverse. And all of the research I've done so far, most of the people with these diseases seem to come from these neurodiverse populations.
amazing, amazing.
So I think the thing is, the people don't understand the neurodiversity in the right way. They don't see it in the right light. Even the author who invented the HSP group, she said that this is a behavioral trait. Whereas for me, it's not a behavioral trait. It's your reaction. It's your reaction to whatever's happening. So maybe if somebody says, okay, let's go out to party tonight to this wild club and drink lots and stuff. And maybe if you're true to yourself, you're just like, no, I don't want to go to a loud club tonight. It doesn't sound like fun. And then so that would be considered like a different, strange behavior for an 18-year-old, for example. But it's just that they're being true to themselves. But if somebody who's not true to themselves says, okay, I'll go out and party and drink and whatever, and then their behavior is normal because they're doing what everybody else is doing, but they're not being true to themselves. So that the problem is the difference between what society expects and then how true people are to themselves. So it's not the behavior per se, it's how your personality is affected by society.
So interesting what you just said regarding the HSPs. I mean, it's a spectrum, of course. I don't think I'm super, super sensitive, but I'm definitely more sensitive than other people, especially in regards to sounds. So I remember back in school, whenever we needed to write a test, I asked the teacher to hang off the clock at the wall just because the ticking was distracting me, and no one else had the issue, but for me it was so present, like, oh Lord, I cannot do anything right now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a trait of HSP.
Mhm.
Also because there's that conflict of like you feel bad because it's affecting you, and then you feel bad because you have to ask the teacher
Mhm.
to make this
Yeah,
change. And then you
but he
feel
did,
bad because
luckily.
the other people are looking at you strange because you're
Yeah.
asking for this. So there's all of those conflicts that most other people don't have.
Yeah. Yeah. In my experience is if you embrace it and you are just polite when asking for special things, then mostly it's fine. I'm very sensitive to cold temperatures. Like, I cannot deal with that at all. It's great that I'm working in Iraq now because there are none of these issues here unless my colleagues switch on the AC and people are accommodating for sure. Maybe they say like, "Oh, you're not normal." And I'm like, "No, you're not normal. How can you live in a fridge? What's wrong with you?"
I know how you feel. When I was in Tel Aviv, everybody had the air conditioning on at like 16 degrees or 18 degrees. And I was like, it's
Wrong.
freezing cold.
It's just wrong. Agreed. Troy, what's your opinion on dialysis for people that suffer from the issues that we're talking about?
Dialysis? You mean like for a
Yes.
kidney?
Yeah, it's like it's basically washing the blood or cleaning the blood.
Okay, all right. I know what you're talking about. It's not dialysis, because dialysis is when it's done with the kidneys.
Okay.
But in the other one is like when they're they're scrubbing the blood and stuff like that.
Mm,
I think that what they were doing in Germany is interesting because they're like looking for the microclots and then giving blood thinners and things like that. But I heard a lot of stories of people feeling much worse after the dialysis
okay.
because it takes out everything. So
Yikes.
there must be something helpful that is being removed as well.
Okay.
I think and also it's not curing the root problem.
Got it.
The root problem is that you have something in your body that shouldn't be there, or the lymphatic system and the liver should be getting rid of it. So
Mhm.
I don't think it's a long-term cure.
Got
Doesn't
it.
seem, and seems to be too risky, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that advice because I'm in contact with a doctor that was recommended to me by a friend who is not suffering from long flu, long virus or ME/CFS, and they said no, we might be able to help you, but of course it also costs a lot of money. Which I mean, I would be willing to pay if it provided me with some form of healing or comfort. But maybe the risk is too high because I already reached a good level. And last time I tried sports, right? We talked about this. That set me back a lot, and it brought back my tinnitus, which I thought was gone. So I have that again. So no, I'm not messing. I will refrain.
Yeah. I think, I mean, if for expensive experimental therapies, IVIG could be interesting,
Hmm.
but that's usually very expensive and hard to access.
Yeah.
Um, there was a study from Dr. Petrino in Mount Sinai where I think it's still a preprint, but they took, I think, about 100 people and gave them triple therapy of two drugs working against Epstein-Barr or
Hmm.
different herpes viruses for like about 100 or 120 days. And then they also added in the Paxlovid for 15 days in there as
Hmm.
well. So for a while, they were taking like 3 antivirals at one time. So that might be a useful thing to try, especially if you're dealing with herpes virus reactivations, is to try that type of long-term antiviral therapy that lasts for 4 months.
Okay. Yeah, luckily I'm not suffering from any kind of herpes infections or outbreaks, but the Epstein-Barr has been something that would just come up. And I hope you can hear me, there's a helicopter in the background. And I did have a strong Epstein-Barr outbreak when I was at school years ago. And I remember having been sick for like 6 weeks. It went away, luckily, but it has been, as I told you, reactivating also.
Other things which are fairly low risk or like vitamin D.
Oh yeah, I'm stacking that 100%. Yeah,
Uh,
that's a
I would aim for
100% a
very high,
staple. We are all
the high level
deficient.
of normal.
Yeah. Oh, 100%, 100%. I'm
Yeah.
not. Yeah. My level is quite high. I think around 70 or 80. I forgot the measures. Maybe that's not useful information, but it's high. I
Yeah.
know the recommended is like at something above 30, but 30, that's not deficient. I'm not falling for that. We are all deficient of vitamin D, most of us, because we're not spending, I don't know, 6 hours per day outside working, plowing the fields
It's
or
difficult.
searching for any live animals to shoot and eat. Your immune system is getting stronger, right?
Yeah. I
In
mean,
general.
it's actually a hormone, not a vitamin. So it's an important hormone. I think doing extensive like a complete genome test could be useful to see if there's some deficiency that you could easily plug up with just taking vitamin B6 or something. And then
Hmm.
you could like get rid of most of the other vitamins and just say, okay, well, I just need vitamin B6.
Great. Yeah.
But there are other tests that you can do for different you can do vitamin panels to see how the different levels of vitamins and minerals are in your body and see if you can find some deficiency.
Is there a complete genome test that you know of? I know these DNA ancestry trackers. Some scan that, but I think there's only one provider that gives you the whole um,
I think it depends on the country, but there are usually, you just have to make sure that they give you the whole genome and that
genome.
They give you the whole genome, and then they give you the file, and that you have complete control over the file for
Hmm.
privacy reasons. And then once you have the whole genome in a file, then you can actually send that to an expert, and then they can look at it. And there's different websites that you can upload your genome to, and then they can give you feedback. But I'm not an expert.
Amazing.
If you look
Yeah.
at Kat Boniface from Renegade Research, she's an expert in genetics. She could give a
Writing
lot
it
better.
down.
She's an expert on genetics, veterinary science. MECFS came from traumatic brain injury. So we all come from different sides. Different road, same destination.
Amazing, really.
Are there other things you tried that worked or that made you feel worse?
I tried fasting. That seemed to not a big difference. I think I would have to do it more often and also for a longer period. I fasted, I think, for 2 or 3 days. I did drink water, of course. Maybe I'm considering that again. The autophagy seems to be an amazing tool to also prevent cancer or whatnot.
Yeah. I don't know if you're in the group that's created by Tom Bunker on autophagy.
Yes.
Yes, because he published his research on that, and his fasts are like once a week for like 36 hours, one night, one day, one night. So basically, from Sunday evening till Tuesday morning, no food, once a week. So it's short enough, so it's not a huge stressor on the body, but it's long enough to have a benefit, and then kind of doing that regularly can help over time.
Yeah.
So I think the fasting is probably one of the biggest things that's helped me as well, because I had
Interesting.
a couple long fasts that I did. But my fasts were different because I was doing mimicking fasts. Um, you're still getting 200 to 300 calories a day of like a vegetable soup, a little bit of honey or an egg or something, just like very small amount of food so that your microbiome, the good microbiome, is still getting the minimum that it needs to hang around, but then you're still getting the benefits of fasting because you're still in ketosis with
What's the name
autophagy.
again?
Fasting, if there's a clinic I think it's in Switzerland, called Wilhelmine or something like that. I never,
Yes. Yeah,
I
yeah,
can
yeah.
never,
That's by Lake Constance.
yeah.
On Lake Constance. Yeah, yeah.
I think they have a couple of
I
clinics.
researched it.
Yeah.
And one
They
in
have a couple
Spain,
of clinics.
right?
Yeah. But I just did it on my own at home. I just kind of got a little bit of basic food that I was going to eat that time and then just did it myself.
Hmm.
But the clinic seems like a nice place to do it as well, to help with the refeeding process and all that stuff as well. And you're being tracked by a doctor to tell you, okay, you have to start eating again, or you're perfectly fine, or whatever. I think it's a good middle ground for people that don't want to do water fasting. But I think each type of fasts probably have their own benefits. So, but I think water fasts probably lose their benefits past 2 days or 3 days. I don't, because then, especially for somebody who's sick, then you're introducing so much stress on your system that I think it's just too much. That's why I always suggest Tom Bunker's fasting protocol, because it's only a day and a half and
Hmm.
it's not long enough to cause too much stress. And also, one thing that for fasting that helps is if you do intermittent fasting for a month first, to get your body adapted to burning fat.
Hmm.
Because if you're used to always burning sugar and carbs and stuff like this and not shifting to fat, then if you go on a diet, then it's horrible. Whereas if you're doing intermittent fasting of like 16/8, after a month, 3 weeks, a month, your body should be completely adapted to being able to switch over to fat burning and
Amazing.
autophagy. Yeah, I
Amazing.
think it helps a lot, at least in the beginning, and then it just seems easier. The people who just jump into a water fast without having done an intermittent fast or anything, I think is dangerous.
Okay. Well, I'm really glad to hear that this has helped you so much, the fasting. So nicotine and fasting were your game changers.
Yeah, and I find the different brain training types of exercises to be helpful as well. Understanding the neurology to be very helpful, because any little bit helps, and especially when somebody's extreme. And if they're at like 10% or 20% and they're not moving around a lot, then most of the energy they're burning is in their head. So if they can maximize how the energy is being used in their brain, and
Mm-hmm.
it helps with pacing. It's just it's just a way to maximize pacing. And also, I mean, I think that nicotine also helps because it helps improve BDNF, which helps with neuroplasticity.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps the brain rewire from, especially if you've been sick for a long time.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
But the brain training, you don't really have to sign up for watch videos online and read some books and learn everything you need.
Yeah.
Just don't let, anytime somebody says, oh, it's all in your head and stuff like this, just ignore them.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
they don't understand. Brain training was actually started to help people with traumatic brain injury. Nobody that was helping cure traumatic brain injury was like, oh, it's all in your head. They're like, no, your brain has been damaged.
Yeah, maybe there's a hammer in your head or something, so which caused the damage.
Your brain has been damaged. And
Mm,
in my opinion, with these viruses, our brains have been damaged as well. Switched onto an inflammatory state. So anything you can do to get the microglia towards a non-inflammatory state, then
yeah. In
that's a
what
good.
way, to what percentage do you think can the damage be reversed?
I think that I guess it depends on the person and what they're dealing with. I think that neurological things, probably 90 or 100% can be reversed, but it's very slow for the most. The things that are fast having to do with brain training and all that is around PTSD. Because if you've been sick for a long time and then like you did exercise one day and then you felt horrible and crashed, then you learned, okay, if I do exercise, I'll feel horrible. But then maybe 3 months later, your body's healed enough that you can do some exercise. But because you're dealing with the PTSD of having crashed so many times, then it's very difficult. That's why I think that the gradual exposure therapy is the best, because it's the safest way to test your body and just say, okay, 1 minute, okay, do I have any problem? And your mind is like, 1 minute, no problem. And the next day, 2 minutes. And then your brain is like, okay, 2 minutes, no problem. And then maybe the next day you try 3 minutes and your brain is like, whoa, wait. So you're like, okay, I'll go back to 2 minutes for a while. And then after a while you try again 3 minutes and your body's like, hey, yeah, no problem. So you're just kind of gradually um, retraining the brain to say, this is where my limits are. Whereas with nicotine, most people feel great and they go running off and all of a sudden they say, oh, I'm going to go run 15 kilometers today. And then they crash and they blame it on the nicotine. That's just the way the brain works.
Mm,
You can't make those big changes in your life all of a sudden. It's too
yeah.
much.
I'm just already so grateful for the progress that I was able to make. And I wish everyone to also experience some kind of healing, because this is really tough. I've been telling my whole environment like nicotine, nicotine, nicotine. It's so often it's so often that you hear, oh yeah, I know someone who's also suffering, or the girlfriend of my friend, she's been bedridden. Um, if nicotine can be of help to them, amazing, amazing. I'm in touch with a few people that have told me that nicotine has been tremendous for their recovery, or for their healing process. And it's great, even though I just spoke to like 4 or 5 and I was able to help them. That already
Uh,
gives me such a good feeling.
yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, since most of the doctors don't know, they
They
don't
have
have the
no
same sense of
clue.
urgency. They don't have the same sense of
No,
urgency.
they have no clue. Luckily, I have a great doctor. She even visited me at my house, and she took notes. Like, okay, what's the dose? And oh yeah, I have multiple other patients. I want to tell them about nicotine. She didn't know the doctor from my employer. She also took notes when I told her about nicotine. Like, amazing stuff. How long? What's the dose? So yeah, that's the joke now. The doctors take notes.
Yeah, it is kind of strange to have, I'm not a doctor and I don't pretend to be one, but I have some doctors like asking me for advice about nicotine and other treatments and stuff because of my experience with it.
For sure.
And it's just kind of funny.
Yeah. And I'm glad they take notes. I'm glad they are not like, at least the ones that I encountered, at least they don't say like, oh yeah, no, that's bad, smoking, blah, 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 blah. Like, no, they actually listen and they are curious when they see a patient and it has cured them or it has helped them, in my case, maybe like 70, 80%. I mean, that's like a miracle now. That's close to a miracle. And then they can go out and help their patients.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you know, it's not perfect and it doesn't help everybody. In the research, it
Unfortunately.
seems to help about 75 or 80% of the people see benefit.
What do you think? I thought about this. Could the figure maybe be even higher if people found their right dose right from the beginning? Because maybe some people are just overstimulated and then they end the treatment
Well,
before
that's why
hurting.
we changed it. That's why we changed the protocol to start at 1 milligram
Yeah,
so that
makes
people are
sense.
starting at really low dose. And then some people actually go backwards. They start at 1 milligram and it's too much, and then they start going to half, to 1/3 of a milligram or things like that. There was somebody saying that it was the best treatment she's ever had, and she's on less than 0.5 milligram a day
Amazing.
of nicotine.
Amazing.
It's like, but how's that?
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know, but well, for right now, I don't really care as long as it's working.
100%. And that's almost like a homeopathic dose. Well, I'm glad it has helped that person.
Yeah, yeah.
More
Yeah.
power to her.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also just testament to people wanting to experiment and just keep testing on themselves and find new ways. Who knows? It's tough, but hopefully we'll be able to help a couple people with this interview and know that they're not alone and there is hope, at least, even if it's not nicotine, that they'll find something that'll help them.
100%. Yes. Here in Iraq, we say inshallah. So
Inshallah.
God willing.
Yeah. Yes, I noticed you mentioned that you
Oh,
had a dog as well.
yeah. Multiple rescue dogs from my time when I lived in Sudan and worked
Uh,
there. Oh, actually, a fun fact that you shared in the group, many of the people that suffer from the illnesses that we discuss, there's a strong correlation of having the illness and cat ownership. Can you elaborate on that?
I think that might be kind of related to how ivermectin helps some people, that people's experience of being around animals maybe is exposing them to different bacteria or different viruses.
Hmm.
There's something called the cat scratch disease that you can get from cats, etc. But I don't know, that might be why, that may be like one element, but I would never say that, okay, if you're going to have cats, then it's going to cause this
Yeah,
problem.
yeah.
But I mean, it is kind of interesting that they did a study on schizophrenia, and people who had cats as children had 3 or 4 or 5 times more chance to have schizophrenia as adults. And it just might be some exposure to some type of bacteria that's maybe maybe it's something that has to do with the cat litter, some of
Yeah.
the chemicals they put in the cat litter in their house or something.
Hmm.
Who knows? I lived with dogs most of my life as I was growing up,
Same.
and I had this chihuahua that would sleep in my bed, and the dog would like curl up right next to my head. So I was getting whatever bacteria or viruses the dogs could give me. So maybe there's higher exposure to ticks and these other diseases and
Yeah.
etc. I think there's a lot
Also
of
here I have to say check, Troy, because maybe you see there's a slight asymmetry in my
Mhm.
face. That's due to borreliosis that led to facial paralysis when I was 10. And the nerve, my parents took like 2 days to bring me to the to get me to the doctor. And during that time, the nerve was severely damaged and it didn't heal back to its prior state. So there also, I can also confirm, or I can add to the correlation, or I can confirm that there might be a correlation. Yes.
hmm Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's just a correlation. It's not a causation, and it's probably just another piece that's being added to the amount of stress that the body is under, whether it's
Yeah.
emotional stress, physical stress. There's also correlation to depression, to severe trauma is also correlated as well. all these types of things, probably because it's just another stressor on the body that eventually the body gets to a point that says, nope, take a break. We got to fix something. We got to start over and tabla rasa and start over again. In this world, some people say, okay, well, nicotine cured me, so nicotine's the cure. Brain training cured me, so that's the cure. Does the last thing that people try kind of gets them over the hump? That's the thing that they credit for curing them, when it's probably 100 different things. And the same with diseases with long COVID, it's probably not just the COVID. It's probably having to do with your environment and how you reacted to your environment, whether you had pets and whether you had some different viruses and how many colds you had when you were 4.5 years old, or, there's probably so many different variables that it's just not, we can't just pin it down to like one thing. So that's one thing I want to do in this next research, is to try to figure out which subgroups are more likely to benefit from the nicotine patch as well.
Okay. Yeah. Very interesting stuff.
Yeah, because I mean, we come from completely different backgrounds, but we both benefited a lot from nicotine. So we're trying to figure out why.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. I'd love to read it once it's done.
Well, I mean, we've already been talking for more than an hour and a quarter.
Yeah,
So
quite a bit.
I should probably let you go and rest.
Could say one more thing. Thank you to the camera. Thank you, Dr. Leitzke, for your tremendous work. Most appreciated. I read the study and everything. Really, really grateful. Troy, very grateful. So grateful for you. To all the people that responded to me when I asked my questions on the precious Facebook group that you guys started, I want to say thank you to each person replying to my thoughts, ideas, questions. It all has been very, very, very beneficial to my recovery, and I will not forget.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
And anyone else,
same goes for me.
I wish everyone healing. Yes, that
Yes.
also.
Yes. I hope everybody gets better. And even if they're not better tomorrow, at least they have some hope. Don't give up.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. There are so many things you can try and things that are being developed or found out. Maybe they are already there, but we don't know about them yet, like nicotine. So, all right.
Yep. Okay. Well, thanks a lot for taking the time out to share your story from Baghdad.
Yeah. Most welcome. Thank you for reaching out, Troy.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a flare, by the way. This is where oil and gas is being refined. It's a refinery. That's the word I was looking for. Drill, baby, drill. I say patch, baby, patch.
Yeah. Good slogan. Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Many regards. Bye-bye. Thank you.